Well, as you guys just saw, old Nelly Bell broke. I don't mean a little bit either. The whole front end broke down. Best we could tell, it's a pivot pin. Well, when the pivot pin came down, the wheels and the axle, it stayed in place, but the tractor frame itself went down. And when it went down, it crushed the radiator. It's sitting on the water pump, you know, basically. There's no other way around it. So what we're having to do is go through these books. For those of you who are thinking about getting an older tractor, I don't know what would keep you from doing it, honestly. There are so many resources, it's not even funny. There are literally hundreds of thousands of those made, and in that time in our history, they built things that last. That brings me to the problem that I have at hand of trying to find these parts. It's not the problem of finding the parts. The hard part for me is finding the parts for the part of the tractor. So this is going to sound a little silly, and try to keep up with me, but basically what I've been told by numerous people, and there's a lot of resources out there to find this information out. There is a group of people on a website called Yesterday's Tractors, and the information that these guys have, some of them I don't know that it's self-taught. Some of them I think of, you know, they've had a tractor and they fixed it and they know, you know, and they're not ashamed, or they don't hold back on telling you, you know, what you need to know. So I got on that forum. I signed this up on an account, Springhouse Farm account, and just put on there, hey, this is what I got going on. Instantly, I mean, just a few minutes, I'm getting emails from people in Michigan and upper New York and Ohio and down in Texas. And so basically, here's what I got. I'll speed up this for you a little bit. We have what's called a Frankenstein tractor. Nelly Bell's a Frankenstein. And when I first heard that, my stomach, you know, sank actually a little bit. But what basically has happened through tracking down numbers and part numbers and serial numbers, and the front half of the tractor is a PowerMaster 841. It rolled off the assembly line it's an 820. From the transmission forward is an 820. It rolled off the assembly line in 1961. The transmission itself is an 851 PowerMaster. It's from 1959. And the rear end is an 861 PowerMaster. Now, the reason why I was told that this was probably done is because the front half is pretty much the same. It's the same motor for a span of years, the same motor and carburetor and whatnot. It didn't change a whole lot. You can intermix these things. But the front half of it has the ability to have a hydraulic pump put in, and we'll probably see it whenever we get into getting the parts and get into this. But the front half, there's a hole in the pin that broke where you can either insert a crank and crank the engine, which that engine doesn't have that capability. But there's a cap that goes in there with a keyed slot, and you can mount a hydraulic pump on the front of it. And believe it or not, old Nelly Bell had an option of having a 2,000-pound front loader on it. I don't know how in the world those rims and front axle or pin would have held it, but at this point, we're assuming that the front end, the pin just came out. I don't know that it broke. It's about 1 3/4 inches in diameter, and the impact from the tractor coming down off the wheel stand from pulling the log, honestly, if I'd stood on the back of the Dodge truck and jumped down on the ground, that would be harder then it came down. It came down soft. I know sometimes it doesn't look like it, but I've spent a couple hours on a tractor, and I've done things I shouldn't do, and I learned from somebody who did a lot of things that you shouldn't do. But that being said, I do know how to control a tractor pretty safely. I feel pretty confident in my abilities. The biggest issue we're having right now is just tracking down the parts. We went to yesterday's tractor and put in the order, and I don't know that it's COVID. I don't know why. One excuse I've gotten so far is one of the warehouses is moving locations. I don't know what that means, have no idea. But this community of people that are around these old tractors, the parts people are a community around these tractors. They don't, when you order a part from these, you don't know who it's coming from. You really don't. Whoever has them at that time. Because a lot of these parts are still made with the machinery that they were originally made from. I don't know how many people know this or not, but when you buy a car, if it has a metal hood on it or something, it's stamped. Like a large machine shapes that hood. And when they quit making that car, that machine that does that stamping gets bought by somebody. I used to work for one of those places, or I supplied one of those places in Madison, Indiana. Arvin Sango, they stamped hoods for 1988, I think, yeah, 88 Civics, and made mufflers for 85 through 88 Toyota Civic or Honda Civics and Accords, and they were stamping them like they were new. So when you buy an aftermarket something, it's usually still made with the same machinery. Some of these things, the pin I believe is going to be made by hand, because I would assume that there's somebody out there who still turns these things out. I don't see it being CNC machine because it's too basic and it's too big. But that being said, speaking of Indiana, that reminds me, when we lived over there, we lived by some Amish people. And our road was at the two dead-end roads. Our house had two dead-end roads. We was at the end of a corner. And the single power line that went down the road went straight to our house. That's how many Amish people were around us. And you learn a lot about Amish people, There was an incident where one of the gentlemen, his wife was killed tragically. They were in the road, and the horse and buggy was blocking the road. And I was being patient, You don't want to honk a horn and spook a horse or nothing. And this one we got off, man, she was mad, screaming and hollering. And there was a horse and a mule side by side pulling this wagon. They had some stuff on the wagon. And she's yelling and pulling on the bits of that mule and screaming and hollering. And she went around to the side of that mule and just hit it right in the side, just nailed it, That mule turned around and grabbed her with his mouth and grabbed her like right up in here, flipped her around, slammed her on the ground, stomped her and killed her. I killed her dead. I was like, whew. So, I was friends with everybody, so I went to the service, and they don't have a service like we do. It was different. There were no kids up there. The husband was standing there, and like they go in groups. Like all the women went first, and I stood against the wall. I tell you, if you're ever around a group of Amish people, if you stand back against the wall and get invited into that, that's the best way to be. So I stood back against the wall and just watched, and every one would come up there and he'd say thanks and shake his head or whatever and say something. They speak, and like it's not German, it's Pennsylvania Dutch or something. Anyway, the women all leave and crying and carrying on. The men come in, they ain't crying, they're and shaking his hand, and he's doing this and like this, and I felt so out of place. I just went out the door and just waited. So the funeral was like, or the burial was like the next day, and we're sitting there, and he came out, and I asked him, I said, what's the deal? I said, I won't be able to come tomorrow, I have to work. And he goes, well, that's fine. He goes, I appreciate you coming. He said, I got a question for you. I said, well, all the women up there, shaking your head, you know. And yeah, he said, yeah, they were telling me how great a woman she was and how blessed I was, and you know, it was tragic, but she was a good woman, and you know, he's agreeing with it. I said, what was all the men like? You're up there like, no. I mean, did you tell them that she wasn't a good woman? Well, he's like, no. They all want to know if that mule's for sale. That's a little joke. Anyway, we're getting parts together. We're hoping they get here in the next week or so. I've already lined up a decent mechanic, the best one I know. He doesn't know a whole lot about tractors, but he'll figure it out, I promise you. Between him and I, we should get her back together. When the parts come in, we'll let everybody see it. But just hoping that, you know, everybody keeps liking our page, subscribing, tell your friends, post it if you want, share it. It's we're making this video so that we can look back and see what we went through to get where we're going, because we know what our end goal is. That being said, in the next couple of videos, we got a big announcement to make. It's huge. It really is. Can't really let the cat out of the bag yet because I don't know the specifics and the exact what's coming. But we should have the details very soon. So thanks for watching. Hang in there with us, and you'll get to see her go back together.